Dozens of crime and public safety bills were introduced in this year's 60-day legislative session. Now, at the same time, officials in the U.S. Department of Justice are moving to make significant policy changes that could impact New Mexico. In a difficult budget year, the challenges of addressing crime across the state are even greater. In This Week, correspondent Gwyneth Dolan looks at the cost of addressing crime and what's at stake if lawmakers can't see where money is being spent in private prisons. This segment is part of our People, Power, and Democracy project, a collaborative multimedia project that examines ethics and transparency in state government.
Senator McSorley, you are up here working on a budget for 2018. How much of that budget do we spend on corrections?
It's the third biggest part of the overall budget for the state of New Mexico.
That's pretty big.
It's very big and it's very important. It's the heart of public safety for our citizens.
How could we spend less?
Well, it's hard to get information anymore out of this administration, but we have the most expensive prisons in the nation per person, and we have the highest percentage of our prisoners in private prisons. For instance, our women's prison is 100% private.
So why do we spend so much more money than everybody else?
Because they're private. It's not hard to figure it out. But worse than being the most expensive is we're getting the least number of services. We used to have prison industries. We used to have legitimate programs to train and retrain prisoners. Now a lot of that has gone by the wayside.
So what would you change?
I'd reinstate these very highly successful and innovative programs to defer people who have committed a crime, but who the crime is not the basic problem. There's mental health issues, there's addiction problems at the root, and I would reinstate those programs diverting people out of the prisons and jails and into programs. They've worked in the past, we can get them to work again. The second thing I would do is I would fix probation and parole. Probation and parole has been non-existent in our overall solution to solving our criminal justice problem. And of course, the other big gorilla in the room is the lack of police in Albuquerque. If we don't have police on the street, crime is going up, and what we're going to do with these criminals and these folks that might be headed in the wrong direction is impossible to know. For instance, people are bragging that our DWI arrests are down, but our DWI deaths are not down. It's a function of not having enough people on the streets policing our DWI problem on Friday and Saturday nights.
Senator, you mentioned private prisons, and the Trump administration has recently talked about rolling back the Obama administration's plan to phase out private prisons. What do you think of that?
I think the problem is there's going to be no justice in the Justice Department. We used to look to the federal Justice Department under Democrat and Republican presidents and administrations for the new creative ideas on how to deter criminals, how to lower crime. And we had a 40-year run of lowering crime rates in America. I'm afraid all of that is gone, and now the states are going to be left to their own devices.
Private prisons have been criticized for not being transparent. Why is it important that we get information about what's happening in private prisons?
For a couple of reasons. One is the recidivism rate. If private prisons produce a lot of repeat criminals, that's not good for the general public. But second of all, it's public dollars. If we're not using public dollars wisely, then we're failing our constituents.
The ACLU is part of a group of organizations that are looking at and evaluating criminal justice bills up here during the legislative session. Part of what you're looking at is the cost of those bills. What are you finding?
Absolutely. Well, we're tracking about over 180 bills this session. That's pretty typical for the ACLU. The vast majority of those have, in one way or another, to do with criminal justice, and they involve increasing criminal sentences. We see that every session. Most of these bills are not particularly well thought out. They're not good policy. They're not based on solid research. They just throw more people in jail because that tends to look good on a campaign brochure once election time comes around. That's unfortunate. New Mexico Safe exists partly to make sure that we are having a reality-based dialogue about public safety in our state. And we're finding that that's having an effect. You know, we're seeing legislators talk about the real costs of increased criminal sentences and whether that's the best way to spend our limited public tax dollars in these very difficult times.
Steve, Senator McSorley told us that about 10% of the state budget is spent on corrections. Are you telling us that we are wasting a bunch of that money because of politics?
I am saying that, you know, and that's not to disparage any of the fine folks that are working in corrections or at our county jails around the state, but it's a problem nationwide, right? We have a mass incarceration crisis in this country. The United States throws far too many people into our prisons and jails who don't belong there. Nonviolent offenders, for drug-related offenses, for things that could be better dealt with outside of a corrections environment.
You recently visited several prisons in New Mexico. What were you looking for, and what did you find?
Well, I actually had the opportunity to visit with a British prison expert named John Podmore, who is an internationally renowned expert. He's contracted with the United Nations, worked with several countries around the world, including Argentina and India. It was an incredible opportunity to walk through these facilities with him, see him ask the questions that he asks. And we visited 3 facilities, 2 publicly run facilities, the Las Lunas one and the one up in Santa Fe, PNM. And we also visited what was at that time the privately run facility for women in Grants that's run by the CCA Corporation. And what we found is just a night and day experience. When we walked into those public facilities, we could ask questions of the corrections officers, of the administrators. We could sit down with prisoners, ask them how they felt operations were going. We could visit solitary confinement units. We didn't have free reign of the facilities, but when we asked questions, we got answers. When we talked to those private prisons, it was the exact opposite. They rushed us through as quickly as possible. They blocked our questions. They would not let us speak with prisoners. It was a major transparency issue and a huge eye-opener for us.
Now, the ACLU opposes the idea of private prisons. Is transparency the reason?
It's one of the reasons. They also have just an incredibly horrible track record of doing their job. I mean, these contracts, we're not getting what we're paying for as a state. We have a large number of privately run facilities in New Mexico, both here in New Mexico and around the country, in terms of lower security, in terms of even correctional officer pay, which is lower in most private facilities than in public facilities. These, it's just not working. For something like this, it's a very bad idea to have mass incarceration be a for-profit business in this country, and that's something we'd like to see end.
Representative, you have a bill that has to do with convicted felons who are looking for jobs in the community. What would your bill do?
Correct. This bill would provide for a mechanism where private employers would not ask a question on their initial written or electronic application. That question would be whether or not the person applying for the job is a convicted felon, whether or not. And so this is sort of a national movement. The nickname for it is Ban the Box.
So how would this proposal help with the reintroduction of folks who are just getting out of prison back into society?
As you could imagine, coming out of an institutionalized situation like that can be very, very troubling for an individual, and then carries on into their family. One of the most important aspects of success in eliminating recidivism is having gainful employment. And part of that gainful employment is being able to make a living. You have individuals that get out of being incarcerated. They may have children, a wife, a husband, a spouse, and they need to be able to earn. That's part of that cycle of life, is earning a living.
And how would business owners know that if this is successful, they're not hiring people who are terribly dangerous?
Well, one of the critical parts of the bill that has to be looked at is simply that it says that they would not ask this question on the initial application. Of course, there are some certain job duties that are sensitive or may require background checks. For example, banks tend to always screen all of their employees, and an individual in this case may not even pass that background check. This is not a bill that prevents an employer from making a background check. It simply prevents them from asking that question on an initial application. We're hoping to engage these folks in a conversation. They may have a tremendous amount to offer, and if they've answered a simple question truthfully on an application, they may never get that opportunity to have that discussion with an employer.
People are really worried about crime right now. So how important do you think it is to be up here at the Roundhouse talking about crime in communities?
It's very critical. You know, as United States citizens, one of our expectations, so to speak, is that we live in safe communities. Keeping those that need to be locked up is appropriate, but those that have shown, you know, the opportunity to move forward in life and become productive citizens, we absolutely need to give those folks the opportunity to do so.
Many of the proposals that we have seen come out in this legislative session that have to do with crime or prison are going to cost money. Is this the time to be spending money on those things when the budget is so tight?
Well, you know, I think the argument can be made towards bills like the one that we started to discuss. How do we accomplish getting folks moved along out of criminal situations without putting that burden on the state budget? We talk tremendously about programs that would help reintegrate folks into the society, help break addictions, those sorts of programs. We have some success in, it's starting to sort of gain some steam, success in reintegrating folks. There's some programs in my neck of the woods down in Los Lunas that are organized and developed to get people back into society.